Okay, so thank you all for coming. And there's so many people here, actually most people who I've known for a long time and who I owe my writing spirit for continuing. I won't go into everything, but you know who you are. And I'm going to read from my novel, They, which is from Adelaide Books. And the subtitle is A Biblical Tale of Secret Genders. And I'm going to read from chapter 1. Who ever heard of a divine conception? Tamar rolled her eye. She looked skeptically at her twin. Tabitha wrinkled her brow and looked thoughtful. Outside the wind blew. The black goatskin walls shook. In the middle of the tent, the pole quivered. Stacked in a pile, clay pots rattled. One of the patriarchs might have thought that the gust of wind was a sign from God, but Tamar knew better. It was spring. The winds were on them. Anyone who even thought of venturing forth knew that the sandstorms would drive needles into their eyes. She didn't fear God, but she did fear the wrath of the villagers. All the signs were there. No bleeding for almost 3 months. Sickness in the mornings and afternoons. Tabitha had been asking for fresh sprigs of dill sprinkled on her terracotta bowl of pomegranate seeds. Tamar told herself she should have known. Tabitha stared into the bowl of water that she cupped in her hands. She turned the bowl counterclockwise once, twice, a third time. She stared longer, deeper. It looked like she was staring at her reflection, but Tamar could tell that she was staring past it. God knows I have seen her stare at her reflection often enough, thought Tamar. I am going to give birth to twins. I will be the mother of nations. From my line a Messiah will be born, proclaimed Tabitha. There is a snort from the other side of the tent. Tabitha looked over to the shadows. As he sat on his haunches, the outline of his shaggy fur led up to his hump. He shook his head and snorted. He pulled back his thick, dromedary lips back into a smile. He looked over at Tamar as if to read her mind. Messiah, indeed, thought Tamar. Was her sister nuts? Aziz was more than the desert transportation that Tamar shared with her sister. Aziz was Tamar's companion, her familiar. He could angle his dong out of the tent flap to make rivers of pee in the sand. Even during the high winds, he pooped in the same bucket she did. She always emptied it in between and buried the waste in a deep hole at the edge of the tent. I've heard of lots of divine births, responded Tabitha. Remember the old stories that great-grandmother used to tell us? In the beginning there was Eve. Great-grandmother told us that after Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, Eve gave birth to 2 sons, Cain and Abel. They argued in a field, and Cain slew Abel. Generations passed, at least 4. This was before God saw evil everywhere and caused a great flood and recreated the world with Noah and all the animals on his ark. This was generations before Abraham and Sarah came along. Years after Abel was slain, the Lord saw that his parents still missed him sorely. So he sent them a replacement for Abel, a son who would be named Seth. Eve must have been over 100. There was no way she could have given birth, unless it was a divine conception. That's true, mused Tamar. Adam wouldn't have been too old to get it up. Tabitha narrowed her eyes and looked at her sister. That's not what I meant, she said, and continued. Then there is Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was barren all of her life. Her bleeding time had passed. So Sarah told Abraham to lie with her Egyptian maidservant, and then the servant conceived a son, Ishmael. Sarah became jealous, naturally, so the maidservant and her son, Ishmael, went off to live in the desert. Then God came to Sarah and told her that she would bear a son, and that he would be named Isaac. Sarah laughed at first. She was in her 90s. She had been barren all of her life. How could God change that? But he did. I remember a great-grandmother telling us that the Lord visited Sarah, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. And then Sarah conceived and gave birth to Isaac. Abraham would have been too old to get up too. There's a theme with these old stories coming into mind. It's not only the men. The women were way past their bleeding time and would have been too old to conceive, replied Tabitha. We've talked about this before. You're always blaming things on men. It's not always their fault. Besides, older men can still father a child. It's women who can't conceive after their bleeding time. Tamara shrugged her shoulders. She looked at the flame burning on the low table. The wick had burnt down so it was level with the narrow mouth of the lamp. She and her sister had talked about this before. Tabitha just didn't get it. Tamara sighed. It was going to be a long night. I never believed the stories that great-grandmother told us, said Tamara. She liked to make things up. Her mind wandered. She told us that she was as old as Methuselah. Methuselah was 969 years old. Besides, she just told us that Sarah was past her bleeding time. I don't remember her saying that Sarah was in her 90s. You must have imagined that. Plenty of women give birth to when they are past their bleeding time. She was probably still having relations with her husband, Abraham, although I don't know why she would. He was always saying that she was his sister to pawn her off on kings, so that they would give him oxen and asses. I bet Abraham got plenty of ass, retorted Tabitha. Supposedly, it was his wife's idea that he sleep with Hagar, the maidservant, who bore him his first son, Ishmael. But who knows, maybe he planted the idea into her mind. Sarah died when she was 127. Abraham remarried. God sent him a woman named Keturah, who bore him 6 children. He also had concubines, not to mention the she-goats and the she-asses. Tabitha covered her mouth with her hand and snickered. Tamara laughed along with her sister. Who is the one poking fun of men now? But she didn't say anything. She was trying not to want to be right all the time. At least she can control what she said, even if she still had the thoughts, and she was right. Tamara sat cross-legged on the floor of the tent. Her favorite camel hair blanket was folded under her. She stood and went back to the back of the tent to where she kept the jugs of olive oil. Her sister always could make her laugh, even if she was crazy. Tamara walked to the back of the tent while they were still light to see and picked up a jug. It was dim in the tent. Shadows lurked everywhere. Still, she knew exactly where she was going. She stepped slightly around a pile of blankets to the center of the tent. Then she bent over the small blue flame so that she could pour more oil into the lamp. She felt for the spout of the lamp and aligned the jug of oil to the lip. She knew the movements by heart. Still, she was cautious. She didn't want to become another story about a tent going up in flames. The light in the tent burned as the wick fed fresh oil to the flame. Tamara put the half-filled clay jug in its place at the back of the tent. Tamara turned around, walked back toward her sister, and spoke. As it turned out, Sarah was his sister, his half-sister. Auntie Nama told me that. She said that you couldn't trust men. They mess everything up and then blame it on women. She paused and considered telling Tabitha that's where she got her tendency to blame men. Auntie Nama had taught her well. Tamara was usually right in her judgment of men, but she decided not to share her thoughts. Tabitha would be able to make the connection on her own. The old stories were created to put women in their place, continued Tamar. It started with Eve when she listened to the crafty serpent and ate from the tree of knowledge, continued Tamar. The serpent is from the ancient times. It represents the feminine. Circling from tail to toe, it represents the universe. It symbolizes wisdom and rejuvenation through shedding its skin. Maybe Eve was just hungry. Tabitha batted her eyelids at Tamar. You're in a fine condition to make jokes. Tamar exercised her older sister prerogative. Everyone knows that women are stronger and came first. There is no way that Eve was born from Adam's rib, exclaimed Tamar. She was stating the obvious, but her sister needed to hear this. Tabitha studied her reflection. The surface of the bowl of water shimmered. The light in the tent was too dim to reflect from the bowl of water. The oracle must be providing her own light so that she could speak to Tabitha. Tamara was impressed, but she didn't say anything. Her sister's tendency toward grandiose notions didn't need any encouragement. Tamara stared into her sister's face. Looking at Tabitha was like looking at herself. They were born the same day to the same mother. They had never known her, but she had carried them in her belly. They both had long hair, dark and shiny as onyx. They had creamy skin. They had light complexions for Arab girls. Their white-spaced, dark brown eyes, deep-set in their oval faces, flashed when they were angry. Whenever they had something to hide, they both lowered their long lashes and looked completely innocent. Tamar hid her beauty behind a widow's veil. She wasn't sure she believed in God. But her late husband, who liked to slap her around, may have made a believer out of her. Afterwards, he was always remorseful and said that he only did it because it was expected. But she could tell from the gleam in his eye that he enjoyed it. She was desperate. So she started praying to God to protect her. She prayed and prayed. Finally, God smote down She was left childless. Later, her father-in-law, Judah, promised her that he would give her to one of his other 2 sons so that she could bear a son. When she was a young woman, a virgin, she had seen Judah in the village market staring at her while he fondled melons. His wife, Shua, pretended to be interested in the fruit. But Tamar could tell that she was just really keeping an eye on him. In the old days, just a few generations ago, it was unheard of for a man just to have one wife. He usually had 2 or 3. Sometimes he had several hundred wives, along with entire harems and concubines too. It wasn't yet written in stone that a man should have just one wife. A wife as beautiful and regal as Shua would never stand for her husband to have other women, but he was still a man. Tamar suspected that since Judah couldn't have her for himself, he picked her for his firstborn. Desert life was harsh. A woman around these parts was nothing without a husband and sons. Tamar knew that she could have done worse than to be chosen to be a mother in Judah's line, so she said yes. Not that she had a choice. If she had turned Judah down, she would have been burned at the stake or exiled. Judah was well off. It was rumored that he had a connection to the one God. That's why God smote down Another man could have been behaving badly, but God wouldn't have noticed. Was meant to continue Judah's line. God didn't want him polluting the gene pool. Her women friends saved her. After was smote down, they came and comforted her. They baked cakes and burned incense for the Queen of Heaven. Iska, Tamar's closest friend since childhood, prophesied that women would come seeking Tamar's knowledge of herbs and healing. Tamar had thought Iskar was just talking. The priest said that only men could be physicians, and most of them came from Egypt. The priest also said that praying to God was the only way to become healed. But the women needed help, and Tamar could help them. Soon they brought silver coins to her, as well as food. It wasn't forbidden for a woman to be a healer, yet Tamar suspected that soon it would be. The priests pretended that they could solve everyone's problems. Tamar kept a low profile. She only treated women who were friends of friends, and she never gave advice at the market where someone could overhear. Many of the women who came to her were terrified of dying in childbirth. If it were early enough, Tamar would give them a mixture of herbs that made a bitter drink that would end their travails. Tamar had never felt any maternal stirrings, despite the fact that a son was still promised to her by her father-in-law. A son would take care of her, at least during the years when she was old enough to fetch water and do chores around the tents. Then he would grow to be a man and leave to start a family of his own. Tamar wasn't gullible enough to think that Judah was promising a son from his line because he cared about her well-being. He wanted his line to continue. And this was a fate Tamar wanted to avoid. God had smote down Onan, Judah's second son, for spilling his seed. It was possible that Tamar had something to do with God's intervention. She had prayed to remain childless. After God struck down Onan, Tamar said another prayer to thank him. Who could say maybe there was a God?
Yeah.
Everyone does not know that women are stronger, said Tabitha. She looked at her sister levelly. The only ones who know are the women in their goddess cult who come to your tent in secret. And they are afraid to talk about what they know. You are too. Look, you hiding in the tent because you are afraid of Judah's promise to give you to his third son, since died and left you childless, and since Onan died too. When she mentioned Onan, Tabitha started to snicker. Tamar looked at her sister sternly. I am not hiding in this tent. I prefer it in here. It's dark and cool. Aziz likes too. And as for Onan being struck down by God for spilling his seed, I don't for a minute believe it. How people can believe in a God they can't see is beyond me. Onan most likely died from pulling on his tongue so much. I don't know when he had time to eat and drink. I've never seen anyone so obsessed with himself. When was living and Onan came to visit, he would go behind the tent. He said he had to relieve himself, but we could hear him jerking and moaning. He didn't even take a tablet with him. He didn't need any edgings to get him going. I'm going to stop there, but that is the beginning of day. Thank you.